Leslie Lemke was born prematurely in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1952. As a complication of his birth, his eyes were surgically removed in the first months of life, and he also had brain damage and cerebral palsy. Given up for adoption, he was taken in by a nurse named May Lemke. Social services warned May that Leslie might not survive, but she was determined to prove them wrong. His childhood was extremely difficult, as Leslie required constant care. It took 1 whole year before Leslie could chew food on his own. He was 12 before he learned to stand, and 15 before he learned to walk. Socially, he was distant and withdrawn. And yet, something incredible happened when May gave Leslie a piano at the age of 7. Leslie quickly took to the instrument, soon being able to flawlessly play complicated compositions he had heard only once. He soon showed the same ability with other instruments, like the drums, accordion, and organ. By 1980, Leslie was giving regular concerts in Wisconsin, and was eventually featured on a number of TV programs such as 60 Minutes, the CBS Evening News, and That's Incredible. There was even a TV movie made about the incredible story of him and his adoptive mother, called The Woman Who Willed a Miracle. Alonzo Clemens was born in Boulder, Colorado in 1958. At the age of 3, he suffered a severe brain injury in a fall, leaving him with a developmental disability, with an IQ of 40 and the mental development of a 6-year-old throughout his adult life. Shortly after the head injury, though, he began to sculpt with whatever was handy, and would go on to become a celebrated sculptor who can mold a perfect specimen of any animal with clay in an hour or less after only a single glance at the animal itself, with every muscle and tendon perfectly positioned in his sculptures. Today, both Lemke and Clemens are 2 of the most well-known and well-publicized examples of savant syndrome, a rare condition in which someone with significant mental disabilities demonstrates certain abilities far in excess of average. Those with the condition generally have a neurodevelopmental disorder, such as autism spectrum disorder, or they might have a brain injury when they are younger. There is still no widely accepted cognitive theory to assuredly explain savants' combination of talent and deficit. It's been suggested that individuals with autism are biased towards detail-focused processing, a consequence of enhanced perception or sensory hypersensitivity, and that this predisposes them to savant talents. But there's another, lesser publicized and discussed theory about savant syndrome, that perhaps these unique individuals are simply the ultimate example of an ability we all might possess on some level. The ability to tap into what Carl Jung referred to as the collective unconscious, a broad concept of inherited traits, intuitions, and collective wisdom of the past. Daryl Treffert, the author of Islands of Genius, The Bountiful Mind of the Autistic, Acquired, and Sudden Savant, believes that this idea, which he and others refer to as genetic memory, must at least be in the conversation when discussing possible causes of savant syndrome. In a blog on the subject for Scientific American, Treffert wrote that, rather than coming into the world as a blank slate, he believes all individuals might be born with factory-installed software, instincts and abilities not learned, but rather naturally inherited from ancestors, and that the brain injuries and neurodevelopmental disorders of some allow them to somehow tap into these dormant capacities more effectively than others. Whether or not Treffert is onto something in regards to how it relates to savants, there's no doubt the concept of genetic memories present at birth, and the idea that common experiences of a species become incorporated into its genetic code, is a much discussed, much studied subject in psychology in general. And, not surprisingly, it's also been great fodder for a number of fictional storytellers over the years. The idea of genetic memory nicely lines up with stories of destiny and those who are born for greatness, and can be seen in stories as varied as Frank Herbert's Dune books, Jean M. Augh's Clan of the Cave Bear, and even the 1997 sci-fi sequel Alien Resurrection, in which a clone of Ellen Ripley remembers not only Ripley's past, but other memories suggested to be a result of her genetic crossbreeding with alien DNA. But perhaps the most prevalent modern example of genetic memory as a pop culture storytelling tool is in one of the most successful video game franchises of its era, a series which utilizes the idea of genetic memory as its primary narrative crux. And, if the truth of genetic memory is truly as real as some psychologists and the makers of this game series would want you to accept, perhaps someday, far in the future, the descendants of those responsible for the ill-fated cinematic adaptation of said video game franchise will all be born with an intense natural instinct telling them a simple, undeniable truth buried deep in the DNA memories of their ancestors. That truth? It's very hard to make a movie out of a video game. The year is 2016, and Ubisoft Motion Pictures, working with New Regency Productions and 20th Century Fox, is ready to turn one of its parent company's most popular video games into the next big cinematic franchise, with Assassin's Creed. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Welcome once again to Failure to Franchise, the show dedicated to some of Hollywood's most infamous mistakes, missteps, and misfires. This is Trev.
And I'm Chris, and we are Assassins. Now prepare the the animus.
Okay, I was wondering how many seconds it would take into this podcast before the first ass joke happened. So
yes, good.
So thank you for just getting it out of the way. We can clear the air. I mean, it's probably not the last one, but at least, the pressure's off now.
Yeah,
and I do just want to quickly say, before we get into anything else, I will say just really quickly, I'm not going to make any other thoughts on this movie known, but I will say if you're making a movie about something called the Animus, casting Marion Cotillard is a risk, because the first time she says, "You are about to enter the Animus," I thought she said you're about to enter the anus, and I was very, very confused. So, in case you can't tell from what we're talking about, this is, I don't know, a kind of exciting one. Boy, it's strange that we're doing a video game movie. Those usually go so well. But but in a rare instance of a video game movie not living up to expectations, we are looking at 2016's Assassin's Creed. Chris, you want to tell the listeners a little bit about this fine film?
Yes. It is directed by Justin Kurzel, most famously known for Macbeth. I don't know if famously is the word, but made the 2015's Macbeth. It is written by Michael Leslie, who also wrote Macbeth with Justin Kurzel. Then Adam Cooper and Bill Collage were the other screenwriting duo to punch up the script there. The budget of the movie is $125 million. Domestically, it made $55 million. And worldwide, it made $241 million, which estimates the film losing the studio about $75 to $100 million. So why didn't this get a sequel? That's why.
Yeah, it's like a double whammy, because it's not only that. I mean, it wasn't going to get a sequel anyways, but then it also becomes a victim of the acquisition of Fox by Disney.
Sure.
And them kind of saying, like, yeah, well, we're not doing anything more with this franchise, because Disney's only interested in the big money bucks, So there's already a reboot of this in talks. Well, maybe we'll talk about that a little bit at the end. But yeah, this one definitely dead in the water pretty much upon arrival. Yes. So I guess let's talk about the history of it a little bit. And I guess, obviously, because it is based on a video game property, I suppose we should kind of start there with the video game itself. Now, Chris, how big of a fan are you? I know of the two of us, you're more of the gamer. How big of a fan of this franchise, or what can you tell us about this franchise if you have anything to kind of say about its popularity? Because I can say my little piece, but I'm more interested to hear from you.
Sure. I was a fan of Assassin's Creed, I would say. I have fallen off the bandwagon for many, many years.
From what I understand, it's gotten very convoluted, right? Very
extremely.
Convoluted and a big dip in quality in the games, right?
Well, the newest one is apparently very good. The Valhalla game is very good. It's kind of like more Norse stuff, like Vikings and shit. Yeah. I hear that's really good, but they're extremely dense. The games, there's a lot going on, and I am notoriously bad for really long games. You know me, I have the attention span of a third grader, so I need I'm rock solid with like a 10-hour game, and that's it. But as soon as games become 40, 50 hours, I will never finish that. So that's kind of where the Assassin's Creed games started to go. I was definitely a fan of the original when that came out. I honestly remember where I was when I was watching that trailer for E3, the Entertainment Expo, seeing the announcement trailer, and it is awesome. Like it was a brand new way of video games, I would say. Like obviously third-person games have had a resurgence, or not a resurgence, but have kind of like crescendoed in the last 10 years. But this third-person video game was just so unique, so fun. It built in the stealth mechanics that I grew to love in the Splinter Cell series. But this was just like a really interesting take on video games, and honestly ripe for a film adaptation, which we'll get to. Again, the story of kind of Assassin's Creed, the games. I mean, I couldn't really tell you about the story, but I guess the premise of the games is in the future, there's a guy, and he has genetic memories that can be tapped into through a machine called the Animus, and you basically go play missions back in the past. So 15th, 16th century Spain, all that, like, just tons of different historical spots, but linked through genetic memory. So it's just really interesting. It's really fun. And the most fun gameplay mechanic of it was the parkour. So you running around on top of buildings and being chased by guards and stuff. It was just really energetic and fun. There was a lot of really sweeping, just cinematic stuff, I would say. And the games always looked great too. So like the Assassin's Creed games are definitely AAA games by Ubisoft, the studio that made them. But I have definitely fallen off the bandwagon since Assassin's Creed 1 and 2. I played a little bit of Black Flag, which is kind of the pirate one. That one's cool. Mm-hmm. But again, these games are just dense, man. Like, they just take too long. So that is kind of sums up my history with the quote-unquote franchise.
Yeah, I obviously have a slightly different one, and mine's like a little bit more negative. But that's just to be expected. So I will preface this by saying, as I just mentioned, I'm just not as much of a gamer. But honestly, part of that stems from this franchise a little bit. Because when I had my PS3, I've talked to you about this like off mic before, but I primarily got the PS3 as a Blu-ray player, and then I was like, well, I should get some games for this, And I got like Lego Star Wars, which I really enjoyed, the first couple Batman Arkham games, which I thought were great. And then I was at the point where Assassin's Creed, I think the first one came out as like Assassin's Creed Legends or whatever, you could get it like cheaper. And I didn't know too much about the series, but I'd always seen like the visuals of it, and I will admit that like, just the look of the assassin with like the hood and everything and the screenshots I'd see in the video, it definitely looked cool. As you said, it's very cinematic. Seemed like something that would be pretty awesome. And this is one of those games I played and kind of like ruined modern gaming for me. And this is something I've talked with you about. I'm trying to remember this specific part, but I was playing it. First of all, I went in not knowing the story at all. So the entire like modern day Animus thing was like a total shock to me when I started playing the game. Mm-hmm. And I felt like, wow, this is like kind of overly complicated and overly convoluted. Why isn't this not just the assassin thing? I never really quite understood the purpose of like the time stuff. And we'll talk about that with the movie for sure.
Yeah.
But then during the actual like play of the assassin, you're right. Like the parkour, the running around the city can be kind of fun. But there was a moment where like I fell into the water or something, and you have to like grab a log to pull yourself out. And it was the thing where like that happens, and then the screen just basically comes on, like directions come on the screen and tell you to beat this part, just keep pressing X or something. And I was like, this is stupid. Like, this is not what I enjoy about video games, where I'm just always being kind of like led along to the next thing and then being told how to do it and then just having to do it. That's where I started to like, if you've ever heard me complain about how I feel like too many modern games are just movies that are like basically asking you to press button combos at certain times, and they don't seem as intuitive and actually like kind of complex as old video games. I always think of this game as a great example. So I'm probably being unfair because I didn't give it like a full shot, but I always relate this franchise as like one of the games where it's like, I think I'm just kind of done with modern gaming. I don't know if that makes sense or.
No, it does. They're called QuickTime events, and that's like they really gained notoriety in the God of War series because that was like the first, especially on the PS2. When that game first came out, it was like extremely cinematic, and it's hard to play a movie as it is to make a game as a movie, which we'll talk about.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think they both suffer from trying to have their hands in both cookie jars, so to speak.
Yes, for sure. Yes.
So I can totally see what you're getting at. I actually hate, I don't want to say hate, but there's certain video game franchises that I just like despise. And it might sound terrible for me to say I just don't like playing the Metal Gear Solid games because they're like, these gigantic films. You know what I mean? Like I remember watching my brother play Metal Gear Solid, the one that came out for PS3. And I just watched him watch a movie for about 45 minutes. And I was like, what are we doing here? Like, just hey, Kojima, just make a movie, like stop. So
that's the thing.
I get it.
The video game community has been very adamant in the last decade or decade plus about how, the video games make more money than movies now. And it's like, oh, they become so cinematic. And it's like, yes, that's true. But at kind of the like sacrifice of being video games sometimes.
Yeah.
And as you just said, I think it also, people keep saying, well, we're still waiting for the great video game movie. but it's almost like they've defeated that purpose because as the games have become movies themselves, it's like I'm often like, why even bother adapting this?
Well, that's what's going to happen later, I guess, next year with The Last of Us. I have zero interest in the show because I think the games are great. They're incredible cinematic, survival horror adventure games. You know what I mean? Like I already saw that story, so I'm sure the show will be great. But it's just I have no interest for exactly what you're saying now. So I, you know what I hate? I sometimes just want games to be games.
Right.
Like I've had this conversation with a buddy a lot that I hate when you run as a character and you have to like mash X to run, but then he gets tired and you have to like stop pressing X for a while to catch your breath. Stop. I'm playing a video game. Let the guy run forever. I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Mario don't get tired.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyways, everything we just said about the like difficulty of video games being adapted into movies, Hollywood is not unaware of this, but they sure keep trying. And I think a lot of it has to do with, in this modern era, of course, Hollywood is dominated by comic books and superhero movies. And Hollywood, I think, wants something else to kind of be in there as well. So video games is like another, as we say, it's a huge industry. So they often look at that as a potentially the next avenue. But to their credit, I suppose, but maybe also detriment, I believe Ubisoft was actually aware of some of the things we just talked about. Like, in particular, the bad reputation of video game movies, the difficulty of making video game movies, and even, like, the, studios misunderstanding the appeal of some of these. So Ubisoft actually, in the early 2010s, they take the extra step of forming their own movie company, Ubisoft Motion Pictures. And instead of like doing what many companies have done and just selling off the rights to their various properties, and then you're getting a lot of strange video game films that are in name only or terrible adaptations, Ubisoft says we're going to be like much more hands-on with our films. And their initial slate of what they announce are obviously Assassin's Creed, because that's their big franchise at the time, but also they're talking about doing like Ghost Recon, Tom Clancy's The Division. So Assassin's Creed is really like their kind of like their first attempt at this. But I thought that was interesting and something worth mentioning, that they actually had a lot of creative control over this film, and we can talk about whether that's ultimately a good thing or a bad thing. So I can see both ways,
Yeah. They also chose Michael Fassbender to be the primary candidate to play the main character, Cal Lynch. That was always their number one choice too, which is interesting.
And it sounds like he campaigned for it as well. Like he gets when he gets involved. He gets very involved in this. So we should say, like, Ubisoft had a lot of creative control, but we also need to mention that once Fassbender comes on, he's not just a leading man. He signs on to this in 2012, and the movie comes out in 2016. That's a pretty long, production period for this film, and he's heavily involved that entire time. He brings on the director. From what I understand, he's very heavily involved in the creative direction of it. I saw plenty of interviews with him in the years leading up to this film coming out, talking about how he wanted to work really hard to get this right. I'm assuming, you have to assume he must have been a huge fan of the games, but he definitely seemed like he was really putting his name on this. And I guess it's also worth saying, he made sense as like a choice for them at the time too, because the early 2010s really is that moment where it seemed like Fassbender was going to be like maybe one of the next big stars. I think we'll talk about him a little bit more in the review section.
Sure.
I don't know if that's necessarily the case right now, but 2011, 2012, Fassbender was a bigger name than he is at the moment. So that was a good call on their part, like on a business perspective, I suppose. But yeah, he gets really, really heavily involved. And as you said, he brings on the director Justin Kurzel, who he works with right before this. He does Macbeth. So Fassbender plays Macbeth in that, and is obviously very impressed with Kurzel. Kurzel is a very strange choice for this film. He'd only done a couple movies before this, Macbeth being one of them, the other being a 2011 Australian film called Snowtown, which I've seen and loved, but also I didn't even realize that was him until doing the research for this movie. But he's definitely known, and you can see it in Macbeth, you can see it in Snowtown. He's definitely known as kind of more of like a little artsy, I was going to say artsy-fartsy, like very visually driven, kind of methodical, methodically paced, really kind of intense, deep philosophical films, right? So he's a very interesting choice. This is kind of that thing where, Hollywood likes to snatch up these very interesting indie directors or directors on the rise and give them like a big budget, huge blockbuster. But obviously, Fassbender has a good experience with him on Macbeth, so it seems like, well, why not bring him over?
Definitely.
And then I suppose because, again, the Macbeth connection, for a leading lady, they just turned to Marion Cotillard, who they've also just both worked with on Macbeth. She played Lady Macbeth in that, of course, so she comes on as the leading lady. A little interesting bit of casting on this. I don't know if you noticed this, Chris, but the other female role in this, the female assassin in the past sequences, they were in talks with Alicia Vikander to star in that part.
Right.
And then she passes it over to do Jason Bourne instead. And the only reason I say it's interesting is because she then goes on to work with Fassbender the next year, and they fall in love and get married. But that could have happened a year earlier if she had been in this film. Just funny how the world works sometimes.
And she goes on to play Lara Croft in Tomb Raider.
Also true. Yes.
So
she gets her video game movie, and ultimately she gets the more successful one because she's getting a sequel.
Yeah, well, supposedly.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, Fassbender, extremely creatively involved with the film. He has a quote here that I want to say that will lead directly into our thoughts on the film, probably, and the pros and cons. So he says, we absolutely want to respect the game. There's so much cool stuff in the game that we're actually spoiled for choice in terms of what we can use and what we can't. But we also want to bring in new elements to it and perhaps our own vision of things that already exist in the game. But we're definitely making a feature film, and we're approaching it as a feature film, as opposed to approaching it as a video game. Mm-hmm. So I think from there...
Well, I want to push that quote just a little further, Chris.
Sure, okay, go. Yeah, go.
Because he goes on to say, when I met up with the guys from Ubisoft, and they started to explain this whole world and the idea of DNA memory, I think it's a very feasible scientific theory. I just want to make sure we include that part. Okay. So, keeping in mind that the leading man thought that, maybe this is a very realistic film... perhaps that's a great way to segue to talking about Assassin's Creed.
Where am I?
At 6 p.m. yesterday evening, you were executed and pronounced dead. You no longer exist.
What kind of prison is this?
It's not a prison. You're about to enter the Animus. What you're about to see, hear, and feel are the memories of your ancestor, who's been dead for 500 years.
What do you want from me?
Your past. Welcome to the Spanish Inquisition.
We work in the dark to serve the light. We are assassins.
A man named Cal Lynch is sentenced to death by lethal injection. However, the execution is faked by the Abstergo company, and Cal is brought to a special facility where the Animus experiment awaits him. Here is where Cal learns that he is a descendant of the Assassin's Creed, a brotherhood that protects the apple from the Templar Order. The apple is a device that contains the genetic code for free will, and the Templars may dominate the humans if they ever find where it is hidden. Cal is submitted to the Animus experiment, where he relives genetic memories in 15th century Spain. Transformed by the past, Cal begins to gain the knowledge and skills necessary to battle the oppressive organization in the present day.
I'm going to go first on this one, Chris.
Okay, hold on. Can I ask you one question?
Sure.
Explain to me genetic code for free will.
How dare you ask me a question you know I can't answer?
Can anyone answer that?
I want to go first on this one because I know. So
Sure.
I vaguely remember your thoughts on this film from back when it first came out, and I don't know if they changed or anything. But this was a first time watch for me, and I know you don't know how I felt about it. So I'm going to start. I want to tell a little story, and I swear this is going to seem strange, but this has a point. Okay. Mm-hmm. So as a horror movie fan, I often am asked, what's like the scariest movie you've seen? Or do movies actually scare you? Like that's something I get asked a lot. And this is like the irony of being a horror movie fan is you watch a lot of horror and so the genre stops scaring you the same way it did when you were a kid, because you just get used to it. But you're always chasing that thrill. And what I always tell people is like, well, in recent memory, the one film that actually did scare me was Hereditary, Ari Aster's Hereditary. And I remember so when I talk about being scared by that film, it's not about the jump scares. What I remember being, how I was affected by Hereditary is I remember seeing in the theater, and first of all, they did a very good job with the promotion of that film, to where the trailer was very misleading. It made you think it was just this film about the young girl getting possessed. And then you watch the film and something very unexpected happens early on in the film that you don't see coming at all. And that moment is so emotionally raw, like what happens and how the family reacts to it, that from that point on, you don't feel safe anymore. Because you're like, wow, I'm in the hands of a filmmaker who is just taking me places I didn't expect to go. And for the rest of the movie, sitting in the theater, I remember just feeling like physically uncomfortable. Like that movie was like getting to me on like a level of like, I just felt anxious and nervous watching it. And that's why I said, oh, that film actually got to me. Now, I bring that up because Assassin's Creed had a similar reaction to me on a physical level, to where about 15 minutes into this film, I actually found myself and felt myself being like kind of physically anxious, not out of like, oh, this is good because it's making me scared, but out of like, I don't know what the hell is happening. I was so confused and so annoyed at how confused I was, because I felt like the movie was doing me no favors of explaining anything I'm seeing. I was just so dumbfounded by everything that was going on. This is like 15 minutes in, and I felt myself like antsy watching this thing, and it never gets better. This is such a frustrating, stupid movie. But here's the complicated thing about it. I often talk, and you've heard me say this before, about how I love like when some big blockbuster has like some artistic kind of like intent behind it or some actual ambition. And I will say, what's interesting about this film, I think Justin Kurzel is actually trying to make like an art film within a blockbuster. And I normally think that's pretty cool. You've heard me like defend that and then like stick up for movies just saying like, well, that's cool. That's interesting they did that. Mm-hmm. And so I can't shit on that, but I definitely think this is one of those cases where it just didn't work. Like what he's trying to do is admirable, but it is consistently failing. This is a very interesting failure, but ultimately a total failure, and I didn't like it.
Yeah, so I saw this, I believe, opening weekend or within the week that it came out. I wasn't like excited for it. It was one of those like spur of the moments, like I might as well just go see it kind of moment, you know, days. And I remember like hating it. Like I remember walking out of the theater being like, again, so incredibly frustrated with it. Somebody who has basic knowledge of the Assassin's Creed franchise, and again, it has become so, as you said, convoluted. This movie doesn't hold your hand at all. And not that I need movies to hold my hand. I don't need it. It's fine when they don't explain everything. But this movie needs to explain something. Right. And it doesn't explain anything. And I think you're left with just a gigantic mess without a clear narrative or even purpose. Yeah. When the credits rolled the second time, a few days ago, I just kind of sat there being like, what did I just watch? It's hard for me to even say it's anything. Like, do you know what I'm trying to say?
It's strange, right? I know exactly what you're saying, because it is strange, because it also, the entire movie up to that last shot feels like the opening act for the real movie or something. Yeah. Because this movie, first of all, this movie has no third act, essentially. Like, it's such a lackluster, just like, that's it kind of final few minutes. And then it just kind of stops. And it stops at a moment where like, okay, well, that's clearly a sequel setup, but like, why do I care? And as you said, it's very confusing. As you said, it's not holding your hand. It's not explaining anything. And this thing is, I think they're going for that, right? I think they're trying to make a purposely obtuse, confusing movie because they think that's like artistic. And like, I get it, guys, but like, this is one of those ones where you kind of think like, whew, I wish the studio would come in with some notes, because this is like artifice, like run amok a little bit.
Well, let's set it up a little bit, because okay, so like just I know I said the plot synopsis, but just a reminder that apparently there has been a centuries-long feud between two warring factions. One being the Templars, aka the bad guys, and the Assassins, which are the good guys. Okay, now this movie. It starts with Cal as a young boy seeing his mother getting murdered by his dad, and his dad looks like an assassin. So he's under the impression that his dad murdered his mom. So then he runs away from the police or whatever, and then it flash forwards 30 years. And now all of a sudden he's in jail on death row for a different murder that he did that we do not see, do not hear, do not have any really inclination of why. There's really nothing there, but fine. He's going for a lethal injection, and then Marianne Cotillard shows up, and basically they fake his death, and bring him to Abstergo, the headquarters. Now, this is where the movie gets weird, because, like you said, I think they're trying to confuse the audience, because in the movie, they're confusing Cal. So let me explain what I mean by that. Marianne Cotillard plays like the scientist Sophia, the head scientist of this whole thing. And the Animus experiment is her thing that unlocks genetic memory. Now, instead of just explaining to Cal why you're here, what's about to happen, and explain genetic memory, and explain the world and the history between the Templars and the Assassins, which, as an audience member, I would really enjoy to hear that stuff. Marianne Cotillard takes Cal and goes, put him in the machine. Like, just, let's get him, hook him up. And Cal's like freaking out, like, what's going on? And he's confused, doesn't know what's going on. And they just plug him in, like the Matrix, into this, like, albeit visually striking apparatus that is like this big kind of like, almost like a big, I don't know, how am I trying to say? It basically connects into Michael Fassbender and then like picks him up, and he can mimic the things in the memories he's mimicking in real life in front of everybody, which we'll get to. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I have a lot to talk about.
Yes. I have a lot to say about that. But anyway, he gets transported into this memory where he plays a character called Aguilar, which from now on, we're just going to call him Michael Pastbender. Okay. So Michael Fassbender,
brown face bender.
Brown face bender. Oh no. Yes, it's troubling. But he's in the past, and then he kind of desynchronizes and comes back to the present. He's like convulsing. He doesn't know what's going on. But then after that is when Sophia starts to explain stuff to Cal.
Yeah.
Now, as a scientist, Trev. Should scientists do that?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right that the movie is doing it for the purposes of the movie.
Yes.
Like, it's ignoring like what would logically make sense, and it's just trying to like keep the audience like confused and unsure of what's happening. And it's not fixed any by once we do get the exposition dumps either, because the movie still continues to kind of confuse itself. Because as we'll learn as the movie goes on, so Marianne Cotillard, she's the one who created like the Animus, I get the sense, but she works for her father, who's played by Jeremy Irons. He runs this corporation. They seem to be like at odds for why they're using this and like what the intentions are, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes they are. There's like some like double crosses. There's some, is Jeremy Irons like doing this for the wrong reasons? Is she doing it for the wrong reasons? Is her character good or bad? It's one of these movies that wants to like kind of keep like twisting and like, throwing you off, but it just keeps further complicating. I'm not sure I've seen any movie in recent memory that has this much exposition without ever really making anything understood or clear.
Yeah.
It's that's pretty impressive actually. I mean, not in a good way, but
well, and the thing is like, okay, I remember, Trev, as a young man playing the Assassin's Creed games and being like, man, I cannot wait to stand around and walk around that clinic. and that is 95% of this film.
It is. And okay, I'm just going to get into it right now.
Yes, go ahead.
We might as well just jump in, because here ultimately I think is the major problem with Assassin's Creed as a movie, not as a video game, but as a movie. Or here's why it works as a video game, because in a video game you are controlling the character in both the present day and past settings. So, you are driving the narrative along. The issue with this as a film is that it's never made clear what kind of effect Fassbender, or Cal, I should say, is having on the past, if any. I'm never sure like why or if the past is having any kind of physical effect on him. They don't even do like the basic Matrix Nightmare on Elm Street thing of saying if you die in the past, you die now. That can't be the case, because all he's doing is watching memories.
Or not even the, whoa, I know Kung Fu. None of that.
This is the biggest problem with this film, is you are ultimately watching a movie about people watching a movie, from the past. Because he's only watching these genetic memories that have already been lived. He can't change anything in the past. He's literally just like putting this animus, and then what happened in the past is happening to him. His body's being all thrown around. He's doing the movements, but to really no end until at the, in the second half, they start talking about how there's the thing called like the bleed or whatever. And he starts picking up, now he has the skills of Aguilar. But it's too little too late by that point, I think. The movie's already like kind of bored you to death by having it, as you said, be mostly him walking around a facility, talking to other patients, talking to doctors, and then every once in a while jumping into these past sequences that really aren't long enough and don't seem to have any effect on him. So yeah, I honestly think this can't work as a movie.
It can't, and let me elaborate a little bit more on that, because I definitely, obviously, that was more of like my thesis on why this film is just a complete disaster. Again, everybody's watching the memory. Okay,
this is so confusing to me too. How is it that the Animus allows everyone else to see the things around him? How is his genetic memory suddenly projected to everyone?
Oh, Trev, you're ringing my fucking rule bell right now. You know, like my mind was racing with the rules. So, but okay, before us, you know what, that actually leads into what I want to say as well. I'm sorry, listeners, if I sound a little flustered right now, but I'm gonna try to get back on pace. Picture everybody, all these scientists watching Michael Fassbender mimic what's happening in the past. Okay? Picture that. So in the past, when Michael Fassbender is fighting a guy, we're seeing, as the audience, we see the historical footage, and he's fighting, and it looks cool. It looks nice. It's nice colors and stuff. But then it keeps cutting back to Cal in an empty room, doing the same movements. And you have to remember, this is probably in total silence. Okay? Mm-hmm. There's no diegetic music. There's no sound effects from the blades hitting. It's just a guy mimicking a memory as he's living it in his head. So this is where my rule bell is just fucking firing on all cylinders. If he's mimicking everything, then what happens when he's riding a horse? Is he just in the middle of the room bumping up and down? Like, is he just silently, just picture Michael Fassbender just bumping up and down in a room, riding a horse like he's a mime?
What about when Aguilar just goes to take a shit? Like, but Cal doesn't have to. Are they just watching Cal and the Animus like squatting for 10 minutes, and then wiping? Like, huh.
Trev, there's a scene where he's standing in the room, but he's sitting in the memory. Mm-hmm. It makes no sense. If you're going to, I understand why you're doing this movie. You want to be visually striking. You in your head, on paper, that probably sounds cool. But by doing that and cutting back and forth between the weird laboratory mimic and the historical action, it just becomes really confusing.
Yeah.
The logic is ripped away, and you obviously don't have faith in the action scenes that you're shooting. I would much rather watch 30 minutes of Michael Fassbender, like ride a horse and fight guys and assassinate things. I want to see that. You don't have to cut back. I've already bought in that he's living the memory. I've already bought in.
I mean, to be fair, a lot of it is visually striking. Let's give credit where credit's due. Like, if you watch this movie on mute, it's probably pretty cool. And you're totally right. Like, all the past stuff is actually pretty decent, right? Like, it's possible to kind of get swept up in the assassin story when you cut to it. But as you said, it cuts back too much. These sequences aren't there's not enough of them. They don't last long enough. And besides what you just said, if you want to try to buy into this logic, the movie's just doing you no favors. Yeah. Because anything you stop to think about for a moment, the logic just completely falls apart. When they put Cal into this machine and they say, okay, well, you have to first find an ancestor of his. So the entire thing is, as you said, they're trying to go into these people's past memories to find where the assassins hid this apple, the apple of Eden. And so the idea is, if you're the assassin who was one of the last people who had it, we can see that memory, and now we can go wherever you put it. And then you see them trying to sync up, well, let's find the perfect time to plug him in and go to that memory. But why wouldn't you just go to the exact last moment he had the apple? Why would you go to a couple days before? And then if you say well, they don't have any control over it, well, then if they don't have any control, then it sure is convenient that they just happened to plug in while he's on the mission looking for the apple. You know what I mean? No, neither answer works. Mm-hmm. So it's just the logic is all off, and the movie has no answers for this. So it just kind of tries to, I think the movie's trying to confuse you to hide the fact that this logic is wonky.
Right. And I think another thing that's really tough with this, because as we keep saying, Cal has no effect on the past. He has no effect on the past. Period.
That's the biggest dramatic problem with this film.
Exactly. And he's basically just on rails. Like he's on a ride. Like we're watching a guy on a theme park ride going through the motions while everybody watches him watching the ride. It's very strange. The dramatic tension is completely ripped away because obviously you're like, well, okay, well, Michael Fassbender can't die because we're watching the memory. So like this isn't where he dies in the history in history. So this kind of leans into like my overall theory of video game movies and movies, okay? Video games, you have made a concession with yourself and the art that you will live, die, and repeat until you succeed, okay? You have made that concession. You know that's going to happen, so you've accepted it. In the film, if the movie is telling you that your protagonist can't die by the movie rules and the logic that you've portrayed, you better surround him with the greatest fucking characters ever. People that you love, people that you care about, people that can die, and people that you care about if they do leave the narrative. That is like really where this movie fails. Because I think there's a glimmer of something with Cal that I can get on board with. Like you said, there's a glimmer of the historical character of Aguilar that's there. But everybody around him is just a face. Like, tell me right now, what is the girl character assassin in the past? What's her name?
Girl assassin.
Girl assassin. That's actually what it says in the credits. I'm reading it right now. But like that's like not that I think that has a lot of weight as an argument, but in a movie like this, I really need to care about the supporting cast. Like, I really, really do.
No, you're right. Like, the idea is if he's not affecting the past, then as you just said, it should be that he's going into the past, he knows he can't affect it, but he's actually starting to fall in love with that girl now.
Yes.
Right? Like, he's starting to have this connection to her, and then he has to watch as she's murdered, and he can do nothing about it because it's just a memory. That would be interesting. That's drama. You know?
And you know, it's funny because like I rarely rewrite the movies, but that is totally what needs to happen. It needs to happen. It needs to have him, you know, instead of like having ghost visions of himself in the past coming to him in his cell, he should be seeing that girl. And he should be being like thinking to himself how much he's caring for her because the memories are now blending. But weirdly, it's not the memories that are blending. It's like his like historical genetic self from 500 years ago is like making contact with him now? Question mark?
Don't worry. Speaking of rewriting the movies, don't worry. I got a good one for you here.
Okay, good.
And it ties into what you just said. So Marion Cotillard's character, right? So the movie, as I said, the movie flirts with whether she's good or bad, and that's you know this remains a mystery until like the final moments of the film. You're not sure if she's going to side with Cal against her father, who we learn is like, you know, pretty evil. He's part of the Templars who are trying to get this apple and take away everyone's free will. And she's given an opportunity to kind of do the right thing and allow Cal and his fellow assassins to defeat him. And she does, right? She kind of steps aside and lets that happen. But I guess because she's an idiot, she doesn't realize that they're assassins and their plan probably involves killing her father. And when they do, she decides to swear revenge. And that's the sequel setup, right? Now, before this, the moment you were talking about, this super confusing moment where, like, the ghosts of the past appear to him, where I just kind of, like, threw up my hands, like, whatever movie.
I like to call that the Rise of Skywalker moment, when they should have just said, I am all the assassins.
Okay, there's a completely inexplicable moment in that where Marion Cotillard sees a past vision of herself as an assassin, right?
Yes.
So it's like this whole thing, like, oh my God, she's finding out that she, like, one of her descendants is an assassin. That's interesting. Well, it goes nowhere. It's never brought up again. How did they miss the opportunity to have Marion Cotillard turn out to be the descendant of the female assassin?
I know.
Like, that's right there in front of you. And have that be like, ooh, now she has to wrestle with this. She was like his partner, his potential lover in the past. And that would make her betrayal at the end like so much more interesting. It would like, you would actually be kind of like, I mean, I don't know, you'd be excited for a sequel, but at least there'd be something there. The fact that they didn't do that and instead just have her see like, oh, there's Marion Cotillard in a robe. We'll never explain that. Like, what are they thinking? It's just so bizarre.
It's a mess. Like it's a mess of a movie, and it's hard to even call it a movie because first of all, it's what a missed opportunity, what you're saying there. And it's right in front of your friggin' face. Mm-hmm. nobody in the production was like, hey, let's connect this tissue here that we've maybe been setting up for the entire film. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's like, and like, you know, to your point about how he can't affect the past and how, so like, what do you do to like get around that? Well, then the idea is you try to create a better ratio of the film to where this idea that he picks up the skills from the memories and now has them in the present. Like if all the stuff we're complaining about was just the first 40 minutes, and then we went into like a second and third act that was all about Cal now using these skills to fight back against the organization, that would be something. Instead, once like that full like awakening happens and he kind of realizes, yes, I am an assassin, I'm going to take in everything for my descendants and now be that person. There's like one brief like action sequence with him and his fellow prisoners fighting the guards at the prison. And then like the last act, like the last little bit is not an action scene at all. No. They just like kind of come to the event the Templars are having, sneak up on Jeremy Irons and slit his throat. I couldn't believe that was it. I couldn't believe would they even show you, like, they make a point of showing you all the assassins, like, you know, snuck into the event in the crowd in their hoods. You see plenty of guards around. I was like, oh, okay, we're going to get like one more big action set piece. Nope. Kills him. Movie's done. It's like, what? What? Huh? Like, you don't want to give us like one more big like a sequence with the assassins? I don't know if this is a budget thing or what, but what a shit ending, man. Like, that was just so weird.
This movie just... Assassin's Creed the game is fun. Like, it's fun. It's... I never got bogged down with the mythology of it. I never did. I always thought of it like as a fun ride. You know, like you hop around, you assassinate guys, you get this. It's just like a fun world you can live in. This movie just has no levity whatsoever.
Yeah.
Is there a joke? Is there any humor at all?
I think there's like one joke. There's like one part where he says something to Marianne Cotillard about like, don't you have other hobbies or something? And that's like it. Yeah. It's...
Right. Yeah. Not everything needs to be a laugh riot. You know, not everything needs to be Marvel Studios movies. But like this one just takes itself so seriously. Like I guess there's a quote from Michael Fassbender here that I don't know when this was. This was definitely after the release. But he goes, "I would have made it more entertaining. That's really the main note." Yeah. Thanks, Mike.
Great. Great.
The feeling of the film, I think it took itself too seriously, and I would get to the action a lot quicker. Like, no shit, bro.
Well, that's what I mean, right? Yeah. You watch this film, and you just know that both Fassbender and probably particularly Kurzel, putting together this cut, they were like, this is going to be like the different blockbuster, right? This is the thinking man's blockbuster. That's very much what they're aiming for. And again, I'm not completely shitting on that, but just sometimes that's not the right approach, and it's definitely not the right approach. That even ties to like the music in this film. This score, I actually think the score is like it's great music. I think the score is like pretty good on its own, but it never engenders any kind of excitement for the action scenes. It's never like never makes you like your heart pulse or anything. It's just kind of like it's just stagnant. I don't know. It's weird. It's
really good temp music.
Yes, I've listened to some of it like independently of the movie since. I'm like, this is decent, but it's not right for this film. Like, it's just not. It's not helping the action be exciting.
This one's a weird one, man. This one's a weird one because like I want to like this. Honestly, listeners, this might be one of our shorter episodes, and it's not even just that we are rushing. Right, Trev? We're not rushing through this, are we?
No. It's strange because it's like I said, it's. The problems are so obvious that we already kind of have them out of the way. And it's like, those are the problems that just sink the film so majorly that like, and I don't know like what my, like, what are the good things here, right? I think like Fassbender's actually giving a good performance, you know, like for what he's given to do, he's still, you know, he's an engaging screen presence. I think everyone else is kind of like sleepwalking through this a little bit. Like everyone seems, there's no urgency to anyone. Everyone just kind of like looks tired throughout the entire film. So he was like the standout for me, for sure.
It kind of does feel like again, I'm not trying to, what am I getting? Like you said, the thinking man's blockbuster, right? Like I feel like this definitely is a little bit of like heads up your ass. kind of.
Oh yeah, well that's what I mean. Like they're
Yeah.
going for Thinking Man, and it's turning into like pretentious nonsense. Like
It is, and especially when you have 95. I'm telling you, listeners, 95% of this movie are people standing in bland costumes in bland hallways talking about nonsense. Mm-hmm. And again, the MacGuffin trip, the MacGuffin. How we're creating a physical MacGuffin called the Apple of Eden that is already about an abstract term. Unlocks the code for free will? I don't know what that is. I don't know. I can't even wrap my mind about what that means. And then when at the end there, when Jeremy Irons has the apple and is like holding it up, and all of a sudden some like magic like green lights are coming out of it. Like what is it gonna do?
Well, to be fair, we do all know that famous, childhood, elementary school rhyme. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. He had 3 ships and left from Spain. He sailed through sunshine, wind, and rain. With him, he brought a magic apple. Too bad the movie about it is total crapple. Thank you.
Please clap.
Yeah. In case you're watching this, folks, and you were worried that you weren't going to get a Christopher Columbus cameo, oh, don't worry. Assassin's Creed has you covered there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
if we try to like stretch this, we're just gonna think like more things that are bizarre and don't make sense on your logic warning or whatever, right? Because I was just thinking about like this idea of his genetic memories, right? That Fassbender apparently believes is hard science. So how is it that in his genetic memories, the ghost of his mother can appear and talk to him? Like, do you have an answer for that?
It's the Force.
It's I don't know, man, just very, very strange.
Yeah, this movie is just like a bland blah. It's like I want. Okay, so like there's been episodes that we've had that we get excited about, emotional about, heated about, just something. This movie's like a bad movie, but it's more just like a head scratcher. Like we've watched movies like Ultraviolet, which is like a complete piece of shit, but at least there's like something interesting there, in like almost how baffling it really is. Mm-hmm. This one seems incompetent.
Yeah, I
don't even know. Actually, you know what? I don't even know what I mean by that, because I would say Ultraviolet is incompetent as well.
Yeah, it's weird because this is like not incompetent the way Ultraviolet is. This is like one of those things where it's like you can tell these are like all super talented people making every wrong decision.
Yeah.
So because like I said, the movie actually like is compelling visually. It's not like they're not like I guess the point I'm making is this isn't a movie where like no effort was put in. Like it's pretty clear that like they were trying really hard to do something with this. It's just so misguided from the get-go that they just keep like shooting themselves in the foot. That's what's frustrating about it.
I just can't believe I can't believe that they went into production with an Assassin's Creed movie where it's all about, first of all, it's an IP that is perfect for a franchise. It's rife for it. New guy goes in genetic memory. Let's do 15th century Spain. All right, let's do the Cold War, which is actually where Kurzel was gonna take the sequel, by the way. Mm-hmm. Let's do fucking Jesus time. You know what I mean? Like let's go all over the place, and just every new movie is like a different mission. And then why can't it be bookended by the Animus? That's what you want. You want to be in the past the whole film, and it's just so baffling. It's such a head scratcher that when I say that this movie is 5% of its an hour and 40-minute runtime, because there's 15 minutes of credits, which is very strange. I'm at a loss for words here.
Yeah, and even like on the level of like trying to get you connected to these characters. So to go back to something you talked about way back when you were doing the plot description at the beginning, Cal is in prison for murder. We find out later he murdered a pimp. That's what we hear. So like the movie's doing this weird thing too of like dancing around this idea, because the entire like moral conundrum of this movie is that you're supposed to, if you're going to think that Marianne Cotillard has any point, is that she's talking about how we want the apple of Eden because it'll get rid of violence. We think we can defeat violent tendencies in humanity. That's interesting, right? Like, you can see that as like an intriguing motivation for a villain. This reminds me of like the Thanos thing, right? Where Thanos is the clear villain, but at the same time, there's been all these discussions and memes about how, like, he sort of has a point, on a certain level. Obviously, he's going about it like a horrible way, but like his end goal of like trying to have people with more resources, all right. And like, oh, okay, get rid of violence. And then there's like, well, no, but actually, she doesn't realize her dad just wants to get rid of free will entirely. Okay, so that like shits on that. But even if you're going to connect to the trying to get rid of violence, then you need to like make Cal more of like a violent character, right? It's a total cop out and a cheat to just have it be like, oh, he's in prison for murder. Oh my God, what if he's like actually is this villain? Now he has to be like find his heroic side. Oh no, he killed a pimp and actually seems like he's a pretty decent dude. Hey. And like we're not even really going to get into that murder at all. We're not going to talk about it. And like that's really like apparently the only bad thing he ever did. Like what? Like
hey, I don't know how many pimps you've met, but some of them are really good people.
I mean, I'm willing to bet that yes, I think you're right. Just because he's a pimp doesn't mean he deserved to be murdered by Michael Fassbender. That's for sure. And this like guy that goes around doing brown face in movies. Come on, man. You think you're better than a pimp?
Yeah, like even show us just like a flashback. You know, like just give us something of a character, man. Oh, you know that what about that bizarre scene where he just starts singing as they're dragging him to the Animus?
Yeah.
And what is the song he's singing? What's that song called? Crazy for Feeling? Crazy. Yeah. That's all it is.
You're up, Slugger. I'm crazy. I'm crazy for feeling so lonely.
Set the date for the 6th. If his condition deteriorates, pull him out.
Your father's?
Don't care what my father said. Cal, listen to me. Listen to me. You have to stay with Agatha. Stay in sync with him or it could be dangerous.
Out of no, like, so is Cal crazy? Like, is he actually a crazy person? Because you can't have your cake and eat it too, movie. You can't do that.
Can we talk about, I think we have to, because we're talking about Assassin's Creed, and all the Assassin's Creed heads out there will get mad if we don't. Let's talk about the leap of faith.
Oh, yes.
So, obviously, and I knew this going in from playing the video games, and like every time you see any like commercials for Assassin's Creed or any like quick little ads or anything, it's always the footage of the assassins jumping off a high roof. And doing this like really cool swan dive, and this in the movie talks about it. The movie, it's and in the press material for the movie, it's referred to as the leap of faith. The idea of like taking the faith in that you're going to land okay and just jumping from a super high distance, and that's something that we see Aguilar do. And then this whole idea about how this is a very important thing, and then once like Cal can do this, it'll be like a huge breakthrough for him. So okay, I have 2 points I want to make about the leap of faith. First of all, again, what's cool in a video game is not going to be cool in a movie. I understand and I saw that this was actually like a very impressive jump by the stunt double, but that's the thing. It's a stunt double. This ain't watching Mission Impossible and knowing that Tom Cruise himself is doing the jump, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not taking anything away from the performer who did the leap of faith, but because it's not Fassbender, I'm sorry, there just is a little bit of like, oh, well, whatever. I'm just watching a double do this jump now, right?
And Trev, it's composited to hell.
Right. Yes.
Like the CGI, the coloring, it's terrible.
Yes.
It looks fake.
What, that's the thing. It's like he did it for real, and then they made it look bad. Like, how frustrating must that be? But here's the other thing. So we were just talking about how like the biggest problem with this film is that there's like so little time at the end when he comes back into the present as like now a fully formed assassin, right? At that point, you're like, okay, so he's learned all the skills. He is now basically a hybrid of Aguilar and Cal and all these other assassins too, that he's kind of got like all these memories. Clearly, one of the things we're going to see him do is leap of faith, right? He even goes to the top of the prison facility, jumps out a window, and there's a scene where like he's there like watching as a helicopter flies away. Does he do the leap of faith? Nope.
No.
And at the very end of the movie, he does it, and guess what? Right as he starts to do it, movie cuts to black. We don't see it. Credits.
Of course.
Like, what? Like, this is the whole thing. This is like the signature thing of Assassin's Creed, and we see it once just in the past, and it means nothing.
We'll get to it in the sequel. It's the Fantastic Four moment of like, what should we name ourselves? Oh, the thing is Fantastic Friends? And just like, no, just say it. Just do it. Just do it for us. Also, with that stupid leap of faith, once again, listeners, I cannot stress enough that when he's in the Animus, he's just mimicking what he's doing in the past. So the leap of faith is a 125-foot free fall. Well, Cal in the present jumps, and he's falling. And in the past, he's jumping into water. Okay, but in the present, he jumps and he superhero lands and breaks the arm that's holding him. He breaks the Animus, but he superhero lands. But also, I thought he was mimicking the past, because the past, he's underwater now. So why isn't he experiencing being underwater? And this shit drives me crazy. It's like, you know my thoughts on the movie Us. Okay, there's the Jordan Peele film Us from, I don't know, 2019, I think. People love that movie. I'm not a fan of it because of the rule breaking, because there's this whole thing about there's upstairs people and downstairs people, and basically this idea that they're mimicking each other. And all I kept thinking about was, what about plane rides? What about somebody going for a swim? What about car accidents? If you're gonna mimic these things and set up these logical rules, you better stick to it. So that moment with the leap of faith in Assassin's Creed is completely just, the moment is ruined. Because you're sitting there being like, this movie thinks I'm a fucking idiot, which I'm not. And well, I'm a little bit, but it's frustrating. It's frustrating to see just the inconsistencies from start to finish. It's unreal.
Again, I wish there was a scene where like Aguilar went off and like just started like jerking it, and then like everyone's like watching Cal, and he's like just his hands doing the movement, and everyone's like, oh my god, everyone's like super uncomfortable. He's like, I swear it's not me, it's Aguilar. I can't help it.
The best is if in the present they're watching Cal like just banging something, you know, like, and he's going like really hard. He's going to town, like just fucking something, right? And it cuts, and they're just like, oh man, he's like with that you know, girl assassin, right? And then it like cuts to the past, and he's like fucking a goat.
See, this is why they should let us write the Assassin's Creed reboot. You know, if you're not going to make a good movie, you might as well make a funny one. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Like a stupid parody. Like,
jeez.
Yeah, I don't know. It is a weird one. It's a very strange film. Like, that's like if there's any like compliment to give it, it's that it's pretty baffling, like in its execution. Just because, as you said, like it seems like the pieces are all there to make, if not a great movie, at least something like on the same level as like, you know, a Resident Evil or like a Doom, where like, oh, all right, you know, this is like dumb fun, I guess. You know? But like I said, they're trying so hard to make this artistic. You know, the scene that proves it to me, the scene that like kind of exposes it as like, we really think this is like high art what we're making. And I'm not even saying the scene is necessarily bad, but there's that moment near the end where the main security guard is putting him into the machine, and he starts giving him this speech about like what he thinks about assassins.
Do you know how assassins came to be named? From an Arabic word, hashashin. They were society's outcasts, those who stole, who murdered in cold blood. People ridiculed them, rebels, fools, drug addicts, but they were wise. They used this reputation to hide a dedication to principles beyond those of even their strongest enemies. And for that, I admire them. But you're not one of those men, are you? Let's find out.
And like that's actually a pretty well performed scene. I like that actor. It's the guy from the opening scene of Inglourious Basterds, the one who is hiding the family underneath his floorboards. Right. So he gives this like speech about assassins to Michael Fassbender, and it's like, okay, this is like interesting, but what is it doing in this movie? Because the film like grinds to a halt for this like very philosophical, meditative monologue about the nature of assassins, and it's like, all right, movie. Like, you're still, at the end of the day, as he's giving a speech, you're about to put a guy in a robot arm that sends him to the past. Like, let's not get too highfalutin here, you know?
Yeah, and seeing that it's so joyless, it's a conflict. Like you're saying, that scene would work if they were having more fun with the performances, a little bit more fun with, like, even why isn't Michael Fassbender doing the Neo thing? Why isn't he saying the I know kung fu? Why isn't he like doing his like whoa moments? That's fine. Like, you don't have to be necessarily copying the Matrix. That's not what I'm saying, but at least show me that maybe this guy is enjoying this a little bit. Because I would be. You're living a genetic memory from fucking 15th century Spain where you're a badass assassin that can't die. It's awesome.
Well, and like, you know, you have Jeremy Irons in there, and you're not going to let Jeremy Irons, like, you're not going to give him any crazy, like, over-the-top moments or let him kind of, like, overact the way we know Jeremy Irons can. You know, compare Jeremy Irons, how much fun he's having in something like Watchmen to, like, just how bored he feels in this.
Hell, he dies in the dark.
Charlotte Rampling's in this movie for some reason. What is she doing? Like,
oh yeah,
it's just so. This movie really did. 2016 was a rough one for Fassbender, because he does this and he does X-Men Apocalypse, which, yikes, you know. And I think really, like, leading up to this point, like, especially in like the early 2010s and you know, up to about 2015, he really was like, he felt like, wow, he's like maybe the next big thing, right? This like super big rising star. And I think there's like he made some pretty bad choices. You know, when you look at films like this and then The Snowman and things like this, like some misguided stuff. There was also, you know, some allegations came out about him that are pretty ugly about some abuse of the former girlfriend. I think it's actually, it's one of those things where, geez, I think he must have like a pretty good team working for him, because that did not get as much attention as many others.
I haven't even heard that before, by the way.
Yeah. No, if you look into it, it's pretty bad. But that was like, it's almost like a John Hamm one, where it's like his team did a pretty good job of keeping it more tamped down than usual. But I'm sure that didn't help him any. Right. But also, I think he stuck with the X-Men franchise maybe a little too long, you know? Like, don't get me wrong, I love him as Magneto, but he was just there for like, 4 films, and like by the time he got to Dark Phoenix, people had so turned on that franchise that I think that was kind of like a black eye on him a little bit now too. Yeah. It's just weird. I don't have any point to this. Just that I was all about Michael Fassbender in like the early 2010s. I was like into like everything he was doing. Well, not everything. He still did stuff like Jonah Hex and stuff. But coming soon on the franchise. But yeah, it's just weird how he's really kind of like fallen off. You know, like, and I think this movie is definitely part of that.
But all things considered, he's married to Alicia Vikander, and apparently he's got a huge dick. So
true. Yeah.
Apparently, what am I talking about? It's in that movie. What's the movie where he goes full frontal?
Shame.
That's what it is. Yeah. He's a nice guy, actually, too. I met him randomly in 2018. I was in Montreal for the F1 events, and he drives a Ferrari, and he was at one of these unveilings. And yeah, he was cool. Took a picture with me. A lot shorter than I thought.
What, like 3'4"?
He's actually in my pocket right now.
Yeah, ask him what the hell he's thinking of this movie.
Yeah, big dick, small legs. Yeah. Okay, I might cut this.
Nah, I say that.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about the future of this franchise, because it sounds like Netflix is going to make a series, right?
Right. I saw that like the Sony Pictures is apparently they've picked up the slack, because, you know, as I said, Fox and Disney are just like, nah, we're out of here. Right. And apparently Sony Pictures is like now involved. I thought you know what? It's interesting you said that, because I thought I saw some of it on Netflix, and I was trying to find that, and I didn't like see it anywhere. But is that the idea? I guess. I
think so. Yeah, that's what it's gonna be. And honestly, like I said, it's kind of perfect for that format. Going back to the past, an episode with each mission. Like, I'm good with that. That's the way to do something. Well, yeah,
because like you said, you can everything about like when you just send like Pirates, Cold War, Vikings. You can just do one episode each, and not bore us with whatever this movie was doing. But I still. I agree with you that might be the better like approach, but as I said earlier, I'm just not convinced this can work as a film or TV project at all. I think that issue of like the disconnect between the animus stuff and like the present, I think that's always going to be a problem with this, unless they can find a way to say that like what's happening in the past is being affected by these people in the present, like then it's always gonna have the same problem you just talked about, where it's like, well, we know what he's just living memories. Like there's no concern about what's gonna happen to this character in the past. We're just watching like a projection of it.
The weird thing about the game too, and this is actually a problem with the game, is the exact same thing that the problem with the movie is that he's reliving memories. But you know how you play games. You run around aimlessly, you jump around, you jump into the water for no reason, and then you're just kind of thinking in your head, the logic behind that is like, oh, is this genetic memory a moron? You know what I mean? Like, is he just jumping up and down 20 times?
It's hard to explain. Like, it's one of those things that makes sense in my head, but it's hard to vocalize. But I think you get what I'm saying, is that that idea is like easier to accept and live with when you're playing a video game than it is watching a movie. Yeah. Like if I'm playing a video game of like World War II and I screw up and like like the US loses a battle that we actually won in real life, I don't think like, whoops, I just affected World War II. It's just like, oh, that just means like I was bad at the game or I lost the game. Yes. But if you watch a movie and they change history, that's completely different than when it's in a game, right? Because then you're like, oh, the movie is taking artistic liberties. I know it's like, I'm sure people are saying like, what, I don't get what Trevor's saying, but it makes sense in my head. When you're playing the game, it's totally different because you're just accepting, it's all on me to influence this narrative. But when I'm watching a movie, it's not even like I'm watching Fassbender play a game. Like that would be interesting, right? If he's in the Animus and like what he does forces Aguilar to do that. It's not that. It's just him watching it. Yeah, I don't know. This is why to this day the best video game movie is still Edge of Tomorrow, which is not even a video game movie, but it's the only movie that actually captures what you were just saying earlier about how like when you play a video game you understand you're going to die, but then from the death you're going to learn like what you should have done, and like that movie actually captures it perfectly. This movie is just like, I guess what people like about video games is like watching people do stuff, right? So let's build a whole movie about that.
You want a Matrix moment? One of my famous Matrix moments.
Sure.
I wrote in my notes the live, dying, and repeating, and that's what I said earlier. And I was obviously thinking about Edge of Tomorrow. While I was watching this movie, Assassin's Creed, and while I was writing those words down in my notes, a friend of mine was rewatching Edge of Tomorrow. And I had no idea. And he never told me. And we're going to wake up in pods one day.
Oh no! What if we're in the Animus?
Yeah, we're just my real body right now is just being flung around by this big fucking crane thing.
You're about to enter the Animus. Marianne Cotillard, she's a weird one, huh? Yeah, she believes that the moon landing was fake, and she's a 9/11 truther.
I am not a big fan of her, professionally.
I mean, I like her. I like her as an actress, but she seems like she's a little cuckoo bananas. So.
Okay. Well, she just canceled on our podcast, so thanks.
Oh, okay.
Fassbender's coming because we talked about his dick.
Yeah. Oh, he said he got a big dick. I gotta subscribe.
He's the one that rates and reviews us?
Yeah, he's joining. He's like, yes, I will join your tribe.
I mean, that'll about do it for Assassin's Creed 2016. Do you recommend it, Trev?
No.
Okay, good. Me neither. Next episode on Failure to Franchise, we're going to be doing... Oh, my God. We're going to be... Okay. I've never heard of this movie in my life. It's from 2010. It's a Brandon Routh star vehicle called Dylan Dog, Dead of Night.
Yep.
No idea what it is. No idea what it's about. I don't think it is easily accessible in the world to watch. So we're going to figure that out and make an episode about it appropriately. So that's that. That'll be our last installment of Failure to Franchise Summer Surprise. So definitely keep on with us at F2F Pod on Twitter. That's at F2, the number 2F Pod. That's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that fun stuff. Check your podcast app. There's links. There's links to our letterbox to keep up what we're watching. Rate, review, whatever you do, especially you, Michael Fassbender. Thank you for that. And join the tribe and hit that subscribe. And
one last thing, Chris. One last thing. Not as this is released, but as we record this, it's our 1 year anniversary. So happy 1 year anniversary to you.
Happy 1 year, my man.
Yep.
Very cool. Very cool.
What a lot of crap we covered.
Yeah,
here.
this was the terrible idea.
And we still have roughly 570 movies to go. Thanks, Hollywood.
Yeah. All right, thanks for listening.
See ya. You know one more thing that's stupid about that movie, Chris? Imagine like you were in charge of security at an event for the Knights Templar, and you know that there's a team of assassins on the loose coming for you, right? Because they've recently escaped from the prison you were holding them in. So you hold this event. You do put some security there, but you say, how should we all dress at this event? I know. Let's all wear hooded robes. The exact outfit of the assassins. Boy, I don't think they'll be able to infiltrate us at all, right? Fucking idiots.
It's a big brain moment, really.
Yeah.